95 to 97% of our actions are subconscious. Only 3 to 5% are actually conscious.
Wow.
And so when we think about, how we react to people, you talk about Jay and the why, right? Why do you want that? Well, a lot of that's subconscious. So it's until you force yourself to understand why you do things,
Yeah.
it's from the level of, your subconscious. And, is it that you're fearful, you're dismissive, you're avoidant? Those are attachments that she discusses. Here's the amazing thing. In this podcast, she and I talk about it, is one of my greatest insecurities ties back to an event that I don't even remember.
Tyler, you're a husband, you're a father, coach, speaker, author. You're the host of the Impact Driven Leader podcast. You're a farmer, so much more, man. The last time you were on the show was almost 3 years ago, and it's so good to have you back on the show, man. Thank you.
It's been that long.
It's pretty wild, dude.
Wow, time flies.
Yeah.
I still have no hair.
That's awesome. Mine is going very quickly.
Here's the thing is, and I was actually watching a video right before this, and, a guy was talking about gray hair. It's like, I don't have to worry about that. Like literally, maybe my beard, I just shave more, but I don't have to worry about it. It's just is what it is. But man, thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for being a part of my life, the supporter, the encourager that you are, the example to so many. Man, I'm grateful to have you in my life and thankful for that opportunity that we met so many years ago. Now I remember in Coeur D'Alene, the coffee shop. And so, yeah, man.
So good, dude. In fact, when you were on the show, you were on episode 19 of your podcast back then, and now you've released over 150 episodes.
Yes.
Congratulations, man. That's huge. Throughout podcasting, this journey for you there, what have you learned the most from podcasting, and how has that helped you in your business?
Oh man, what's really interesting is I noticed this in my coaching business. It's kind of gone along the same way, is I am so much better. So like, I can't even describe so much better at reading people.
Yeah.
It's really forced me. Some people will say that, oh, you get on Zoom and it's just kind of like, dimly lit and all that stuff. You can't really read people. But if you go to the extent of having a platform like this, where you get to see the facial expressions, you understand, and you're trying to read people, man, it's something that has helped me in my life so much. The ability to sit down with a guest and to read their facial expressions, to do that in a coaching perspective and read the facial expressions, and the ability to ask questions based on that. It is I've at times realized that I'm doing it, and the only way that I've developed that skill is through the online experience, through Zoom with my kind of clients and coaching community, or through podcasting.
Yeah. Oh, come on, man. That's awesome. As you know, I shifted the focus of this show to really talk with men about their journey with Jesus, man, and how they balance that journey with family and finances and business, man. For you, how did you come to know Jesus, and was there something that prompted you to take a step in your faith there?
I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up, I was raised Lutheran. My dad was raised Methodist. My mom was raised Lutheran. And so it was just a part of our daily activity, weekly activity, being involved in church. Grew up on a farm, Sunday mornings we'd go to church, and that was just kind of life. I didn't understand the concept of a relationship with God at all. But I remember graduating college, and I was 21, and I had a friend of mine. She joined a church. She was, going to church at when we were in college, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I've always gone to church, but never had like joined a church." And like, I knew there was something more. I knew there was more, and I'd gone through the traumatic experience of the death of my brother, and some of those questioning of like, God, but really, but I knew it was there, and I knew my life had a bigger purpose. And so 21, I joined my parents' church because I didn't know what to do. Like, okay, that's what I do. I moved to California, and, again, have this faith. I'm not actively practicing, but if people ask me, yes, I'm a Christian. And then I started to go to church a little bit, went to a Lutheran church because like, oh, that's what I knew. And then when my wife and I started dating, and she was raised in a Christian home as well, we knew in our relationship, our family, it was something that was going to be important. And she was raised in more of a Pentecostal,
Mm.
charismatic type, family church. And I wasn't. And so we tried to find a place that we could fit together. And that's when I first started learning about having a relationship with God and what that
Yeah.
was like. And I was a part of a couple different, men's groups. And, we went on different trips and retreats and started to understand more, went to Bible studies. I remember I went to this Bible study with a guy, amazing story. We met in his house in his converted garage into a living room. And he goes, one day, he was the largest Coke dealer in Southern California. And he
Wow.
goes, he's sharing his story and just how God, absolutely delivered him. And he goes, at one point, this entire garage was filled with Coke. And we're like,
Wow.
what? And he's sharing this story, but he's relating to everyone that said, doesn't matter where you've come from, you're here now. And he would
Mm.
open up his house every Wednesday night. We'd barbecue, and he invited people in to say, learn what this relationship with God is like. So no matter what your history, as he shared his, you could have a relationship. And so that's when I first started to understand, and I would say my real true faith started to blossom.
Man, what a crazy, awesome, powerful story that guy has that just
No,
impacted people. So
totally.
cool, dude.
Dominic Webby.
Right. Oh, man, so good. As a husband and father, I think we feel like a lot of there's responsibilities that fall on our shoulders to provide and protect for our family. For you, what things do you do to draw close to God that ultimately helps you to be a better husband and a better father?
The big part for me is what kind of daily routine do I have?
Mhm.
What time do I get up in the morning? What's my practices in the morning, from a nutrition point of view, drinking water, taking the supplements that I know that are going to help me just physically be the best I can, and then spending time reading.
Yeah.
I go through YouVersion Bible app, and they have a daily reading kind of plan. I go through all of that, and then I started probably it'll be 5 years ago this summer, reading Proverbs every day.
Mhm.
And so that's just a practice I go through every day. I read Proverbs. I invite people to read that with me. I might do another study. I just got done reading through Kings.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing, journey learning about, what Solomon then to his sons and so forth and so on, how kind of the kingdom fell apart in a way.
Mhm.
And it was very interesting from a leadership perspective to see that example, and so that's a part of my practice. And then one of the things that I also add in, and I've done this now for probably the last 2 years, is some type of daily reading or about 15 minutes of reading.
Mhm.
I got done earlier this year. I read Nelson Mandela's A Long Walk to Freedom, which was so
Wow.
enlightening. I did not understand his life, much less what was going on in South Africa during the 20th century. Right
Mhm.
now, I'm reading about Teddy Roosevelt and William Taft and just their experience. And so, why I share that is that may not be outwardly, faith perspective,
Sure.
but Nelson Mandela was an amazing man of God.
Yeah.
And when you look at Roosevelt and Taft and their experience, and they weren't outward with their faith, but yet they had this binding something to them to serve people.
Mhm.
And those stories just kind of help reverberate. What are we here for?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing? Are we growing? Are we making sure we're growing every day? Or are we just taking it for chance? And
Mhm.
that's something when I instilled that practice, I realized I can take control over who I show up to today. Doesn't mean I'm perfect. Nah, trust me,
Yeah.
I make plenty of mistakes. But I know this, if I don't take control over what I put in my body, the time that I spend putting, good information and time with God in my life, then I know what I'm going to be. And in 6 months, I'm not necessarily going to be any better. But
Mhm.
if I take the initiative to put, the right things in my body, if I read, if I, work to grow in 6 months, I will be a different person.
Yeah.
I will grow. And so that's something, again, for years now that I've held on to that has absolutely changed me as a person.
Like you said, it's those routines, reading and just doing that makes us better every day. I read for 30 minutes a day. My kids will come up and they'll go, "Dad, what are you doing? And are you reading?" And they'll go down, they'll read for 30 minutes. And
Yeah.
they'll see me read my Maxwell Leadership Bible,
Love
which
it.
I'm a huge fan of there. I
Yes.
too go through Proverbs every day through that, man. It's just awesome. Uh, Man, you have this amazing event coming up here in
Yeah.
Coeur d'Alene called the
Yes.
Impact Driven Leader Annual Summit, and it's July 29th and 30th. And this is going to have John Maxwell himself speaking, one of my favorite leaders in the entire world. And so I'm super stoked for you to have this event. But what's this event about? What are people going to be able to take away from it? And why did you decide to put this thing on?
Yeah. So in end of 21 going into 22, I launched the Impact Driven Leader Community, which is a leadership community to kind of walk with people through leadership transformation. One of the greatest, I would say, barriers that I believe people have, much less leaders have, is the barrier of insecurity. And it shows up. That's what I work through in my community of understanding it. It is there for everyone. And we can either acknowledge it and take control over it, or it will show up at the most inopportune time. And so part of that community is bringing great voices. Obviously, John's a tremendous voice in leadership, and he's been lucky enough to grace me with his mentorship over the years, and to be at this event as well. I have a few other guests that have gotten to be very close friends that have impacted me. First one is Graham Cochran. Graham has made a multi seven-figure business via his talents. He wrote the book How to Get Paid for What You Know. Number two, he has another book coming out this fall called Rebel, and it's about mindset, and it's about how we believe what we believe. The next speaker is Jake Thompson. He has the business Compete Every Day. He's a speaker. He has a motivational clothing company. He's gotten to be a very, very good friend. And actually, his book club that I was a part of really helped me launch the community that I host now. Katie Casada. Katie is a recently new friend through a couple connections. Jordan Montgomery is one of our friends. Jess Ekstrom introduced me to Katie, and she's a storytelling coach. She's phenomenal at it. I've used a lot of her, teachings over the last few months that I've gotten to know her. And here's what I know, and I've believed for years. The people that move and influence are great storytellers. And so I'm excited for her to share and how she's helped transform companies. And so all of those people together come together, and this is the ultimate kind of theme, is the stories we tell ourselves, the things that we believe, those are what determine how we influence others. John will be talking about high road leadership and all of his content. But I believe it really comes back to that intentionality, those routines. If we believe we can't, we're right. If we believe we can, we're also right. And it's changing and transforming. And transformation is work that we have to do alone, or we have to do on our own, but we don't have to do it alone.
Right.
And that's what I'm excited about this event and having people come together. It'll be pretty intimate. It's small. You'll get a lot of very close proximity to the speakers. It's only 120 people. That's it. So make sure as you're listening to go buy those tickets, because that's all there is. That's all we have room for. And I know with, John and Graham and Katie and Jake, man, they are going to deliver. These are people that are, routine, on stages in front of 8, 10, 12,000 people. And they're people that are close to my life, and they've impacted me. And I'm so fortunate they're going to come to this little event in Coeur d'Alene.
Come on, man. Oh, I'm so excited for that event. It's going to be so good. And just even like your short snippets of who the other speakers are, man, it's super excited to have them there at that event as well. Excited to see those guys. Curious, because you've known John Maxwell for a really long time. Is there something that he has said to you that just made this massive, lasting impact on you?
Oh, I don't know if it's what he's ever said, but I would say it's what he said. It's his belief that he sees something in me that I can't see myself. And so it's the drive to be that, but him showing up as who he is. I tell people that don't know John, that haven't been around John, if you've read his books, you enjoy his books, and you think he's great, then go meet him in person, because he's even better. And I think that's one thing that I always try to hold on to when I talk to people. I had an opportunity. I was at an event within the Maxwell organization earlier this spring, and there was an individual there that I had been introduced to at a speaking engagement both of us had done. And he said he said, Tyler, I can't remember what you talked about. I'm like, okay, great. Then it was really effective. He goes, but I know this. is that you showed up authentically, you showed up vulnerably. And I said, you know what, Brian, nothing what I said matters if that wasn't the case. And there's only one reason that's important to me, is because our mentor, John Maxwell, models that every single time. He's not about the performance. Does he perform when he speaks? Yes, he does very well. But his number one thing is to connect with people. And to me, that is one of the greatest pieces and parts of leadership, is just being willing to connect with people. And I'm convinced the only way you can actually connect with people and have that connection last is with authenticity and vulnerability. And, John does that amazingly well. And it shows up in all of his relationships.
Yeah. Oh, man, so good there. So good. Now, one of the things that as I was looking at your website, that you list on there, that this event is going to help folks gain clarity and direction to lead with confidence without giving it full away. Like, what's step one for folks that are kind of trying to get that confidence and direction to lead?
I understand there's a reason why.
Mm.
There's a reason why, for me, I have also a course you can sign up for. It's just free video series. It's called The 4 Barriers of Leadership. And this was something that came to me. It was divine. It was crazy. I was invited to speak at an event. One of my fraternity brothers in college is running a virtual event during COVID, and he invited me and a buddy, Thomas Williams, to speak. And we spoke, and I had a segment to speak about. It's called "It's Not About You." And as I was preparing, and it was the night before, and I'm like, "This isn't good. This just isn't. This isn't good." And so I stopped and I thought about it, and I'm like, all right, let me think about this. What's this about? I go to soccer practice with my son. I come home and kind of think about it, and then I just dump it out. It's, I have friends that say it's a download from God. And it was these 4 barriers of leadership. The first of is insecurity. And, insecurity overcomes so much. The next 3 are inactivity, insensitivity, and intensity. And inactivity shows up in, a barrier is like, I don't want to do the hard thing. Insensitivity is, I don't care what you're dealing with, just go do the job. And it's like, that's insensitive. And then the fourth one is the one that I struggled with the most: intensity. And people are like, that's a barrier? I'm like, yeah, that's a barrier, because your intensity is a bulldozer. It pushes through people. And I had to learn that when you push through people, eventually you look around and all you see is carnage. There's just bodies left everywhere. And when I go back to the, what can people gain, what that clarity is, it's understanding you are where you are because of what you're doing. And that lies in the thoughts that we think about, our fears and insecurities. And to me, a big part of, changing how our pathway forward, the ability to lead and influence people. And sometimes that starts with ourselves. Believing that, you know what, Erik, you do have the capacity. You said you have a protocol, a routine yourself. It's like, that is what allows you to do and make the impact you're making every day. And if there's something holding us back from that, I'm not good enough. Something one time told me this or that, then that's your limiting factor. Not your skills, not your ability to speak in front of a crowd, not your ability to sell a product, not your ability to do anything else. It is your mindset and beliefs and whatever fears are holding you back. And the barriers, the masks, are when we show up as intense. I'm just going to push my way through. Or I'm insensitive. I don't care about that, and pushing them. Or you just sit on here and it's like, I don't want to deal with it. I mean, those things are what limit you, not the other people, not, a unique skill or talent. It's the limitations we put on ourselves.
Yeah, man. That's a free course. Folks need to go get that right now, man. I think that's awesome. And now you have another course though called Awaken the Leader Within.
Yeah.
And on there you mentioned that you don't have to sacrifice your ideas, your peace, and your personal life to make an impact. Can you deep dive into that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, that really walks through deeper what I just shared. In that course, help people identify those fears and insecurities, and then owning it. And then how do we remove it? Ultimately, that's the awakening phase. And then we get into the growing phase, growing with others, growing for yourself, and growing for others. And then leadership. Leadership to me is three components. It's having a vision that you believe in, that it's something new and different, that the world could be a certain way, and the ability to connect with people so they connect with that vision. And then ultimately that leads to influence. That is leading, and all that put together is impact. And so through that course, walk people through that, share my own stories and journeys and how I've walked through that. And it's with a lot of, questions of you asking, hey, how does it show up in your world? What is your insecurity? I think that's one of the biggest things is I've, been able to walk through this journey with people. Is so often everyone goes to a self-improvement course, conference, whatever else, my event, the same, and yet they don't get to the root of the problem. I shared this with a friend this morning. It's kind of like going running every day. I don't like to run a lot, but it's like going running every day. And at the end of the run, you always come home and you put bandages on your knees, because at some point during the run, you run and you trip and you scrape your knee. And then eventually someone says, Erik, why do you have so many bandages on you? Oh, I always trip and fall. I'm like, well, if you tie your shoes, you probably wouldn't trip and run. Well, it's the same thing as we can go to all these courses of self-improvement, everything. But if we don't understand why we're tripping, we keep putting Band-Aids on, we're going to end up looking like a bubble boy, right? Instead of just, hey, tie your shoes and you won't trip. And to me, that is tying your shoes. That's your insecurity. That's what's holding you back. And it's okay. We all have it. In the moment that you can say, yeah, excuse me, my insecurity is showing, everyone else is like, oh, finally they admitted it. Now we can move forward. Now we can work together.
Yeah, man, that's powerful. I actually was just reading this morning in a book by Jay Shetty, Think Like a Monk, and he talks about getting to the root cause of our whys. Why do we want to do certain things? And then go another level deep, and then go to another level deep of why. And it was so good to understand, like, our whys, our surface level is going to be like, oh yeah, we gotta want to do this. But then if we really deep dive in, there's this root cause that's caused us to either keep falling or we're picking ourselves back up. We've got that resilience to stick up, man. That's huge.
I just had a guest on my podcast. Her name is Thais Gibson. And she wrote a book called, it's right here beside me, Learning Love, Build Relationships, Build Relationships, Build the Best Relationships of Your Life Using Integrated Attachment Theory. And she's an expert in attachment theory. And one of the things that she shared during that podcast is that 95 to 97% of our actions are subconscious. Only 3 to 5% are actually conscious.
Wow.
And so when we think about, how we react to people, you talk about Jay and the why, right? Why do you want that? Well, a lot of that's subconscious. So it's until you force yourself to understand why you do things, it's from the level of, your subconscious. And, is it that you're fearful, you're dismissive, you're avoidant? Those are attachments that she discusses. Here's the amazing thing. In this podcast, she and I talk about it, is one of my greatest insecurities ties back to an event that I don't even remember. That's what she shared, is most of the attachments that we have, what I would call, again, the insecurities, the limitations we don't even know about. I learned this just a couple years ago, that when I was two and a half, I lived with my aunt and uncle for a few months. Because my parents were, they were farmers. They were in between farms. They kind of got kicked off the farm. They were scrambling to find somewhere to live. So they're kind of homeless. They had a place, but they were scrambled all over. And so my older sister and I went and lived with my aunt and uncle. And one of the biggest questions, a primal question that I have is, am I wanted? And as I was talking with Thais and I shared that story, she goes, yeah, absolutely. That's a connecting point. And again, why do I want what I want? Comes from something I don't even remember, but yet that is ingrained in me. How do I get there? Because I was curious. I was willing to dive deeper to say, why do I feel this way? And I think that's a huge piece of all of this is, what we'll talk about my event is be willing to be vulnerable and dig deeper. That's the only way that you're going to find out why. And then from why, like you mentioned, you can start to rebuild a tremendous community and palace and ability to influence others with gifts that you've been given. God has given us those gifts. We just need to acknowledge them and embrace them.
Come on. Oh, man, that's so good. I recently did a talk at the Coeur d'Alene Resort back in March of this year, and that was my first time stepping up on stage for 25 minutes. Got to talk about 100 in front of 120 people or so, and it was so cool to just be like authentic about it. But man, did I learn a lot trying to go back into, as I was telling my story, what's the real reason that I need to share my story? What's the real reason I'm trying to get it out and go through that, man? It's so true that we go back to that maybe moment in time, or we just don't remember the actual cause, but that causes fears in us, man. That's huge.
Awesome.
Huge. I was on Brad Lee's podcast a couple years back called Dropping Bombs. And one of the things he told me when I was sitting there in his office, he said, relationships, Erik, is the new currency. Well, I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts on that? And how has relationships built or helped you build your business and just create better relationships in your life?
Oh, it's everything. And it's everything that I didn't do well. I was always able to connect with people, but to foster relationship much beyond that, that's where my intensity caused issues.
Yeah.
And, one of the things I remember, I did a 360 review when I first started, course, community, I would say a program through the Maxwell company. And one of the things I learned there is everyone viewed it as it was about me. And I was like, no, it's really not. I don't have these like personal goals that I'm just willing to step on people to get to. I don't have that at all. But that isn't what they saw and felt. And, really coming back on that and understanding the value of relationships. And I shared this with one of my mentors. I had to learn how to get lazy. Now, I viewed it in the, years past, it was, I had to learn how to diffuse and turn down my intensity, not laziness, turn down my intensity. And the reason why, what I learned is I had to learn to go at a pace with other people. It's understanding empathy. I define empathy as I've experienced and I've worked through it is putting your arm around someone and walking with them. And, people will say, or, Brene Brown's like, oh, put your feet in someone else's shoes. And I'm like, well, that's going to be painful for somebody.
Yeah.
It's either them or me. It's going to be painful. It's like the empathy should not be painful. Empathy should be supportive. Now, empathy takes vulnerability. You got to lift your arm, put it around someone that exposes you. That's vulnerability. And the same as if you put your arm around them, and this is very biblical. It's like, don't be unequally yoked.
Yeah.
Right. You put your arm around somebody, you're dragging them. They're not going to like it. They're dragging you. You're not going to like it. You have to go at the pace with them. And that's the value of relationships. And one of the things that I've come to gain is if you go into relationships saying, how can I give and support you? Eventually, in enough relationships, that'll come back. But if you go into relationships, say, hey, this is what Erik can get for me, dude, it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
Right. People are going to feel used. And one of my friends, Brad Lomenick, shares in his, kind of way of discerning between connectors and networkers. And he said, connectors are there to give, they're catalysts. They just are willing to support. Networkers are, how can I get mine? And, we can really sense the difference between a connector and a networker. A connector just is gives and gives and gives and gives. And yet they have a lot that comes back at them. And a networker tries to get and get and get and get. And usually people are like, I don't like being around networkers. All they want to do is talk about themselves and be about themselves. And I'll pass on that. And so I think that is my chair dropped. That's all right.
No.
Sorry about that.
That's
I just
good.
kept getting lower and lower and
that's awesome.
Fade away all of a sudden into the dark. But hey, I'm still here. Don't worry.
So good.
Here's what I'm going to ask. Erik, don't edit that. Because one, that happens. Somebody is sat at their desk at some point. They sit down and boof, the chair goes to the ground. Or they just kind of start sleeping lower and lower. It happens to everyone.
It's happened to me many times.
Yeah. Yeah.
So funny, man. Tyler, I love that you have this event coming up, man. It was so good to connect with you again. And man, you're an absolute world changer. I'm so stoked for your event. July 29th and 30th here in Coeur d'Alene. Keynote guy, John Maxwell, and so many amazing other speakers. So good. People need to go buy those tickets right now, man. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Erik. Man, I just want to encourage you and appreciate what you're doing. And you've mattered in my life. I know so many people that we share connections with that you have shown up continually in their lives. And I thank you for that. And to all the listeners, thanks for being here. Thanks for supporting Erik by listening and watching. And Erik, have a good one, man.
Hey, if you've ever thought about starting a podcast but unsure where to go, you need to go check out erikallenmedia.com. Click on the resources tab there. I will walk you through how to start, launch, and run a podcast. I've recorded over 500 interviews since 2017, and I want to help you launch your podcast. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button so you catch every show when I drop them. Thanks again. Keep changing the world.